she wasn't demonstrating it as in like how we three-dimensional people demonstrate something for someone else.
Yeah.
She was demonstrating for me the frequency of the energy that I needed to tap into.
Oh,
yeah.
That's cool.
But,
welcome to Out of the Ordinary, where I have interesting conversations with people that have experienced something different, something strange, extraordinary, but just not as mundane. The conversation I had today was with somebody that has some interesting experience with something called astral projection. And so if you're not sure about what astral projection is, or something very closely related that is lucid dreaming, I do recommend finding some books on the subject, finding anything that you can get your hands on it, because at the very least it's very fascinating. And so the point of these conversations, again, is not to prove or disprove anything about what the person is saying. It's to get them to open up, share their experience, and share their perspectives on it, and to just have an open and interesting dialogue on something that not many people get the chance to talk about, let alone experience. So hopefully this is something entertaining for you. Hopefully this will get you thinking about some different things in some different ways, and who knows, maybe you'll find yourself down an interesting rabbit hole one night. So enjoy.
I wanted to put maybe a box around this conversation maybe a little bit early on, so I kind of know where the boundaries are, because
sure,
I can go literally any.
That's fair.
And interestingly enough, in particular, lucid dreaming and astral projection is kind of a nexus point.
Oh yeah.
From which you can go a lot of different directions. So are we talking about lucid dreaming from the mundane perspective, I guess, is my first question. Or are we talking about lucid dreaming or astral projection from throwing in all the sort of, I guess, woo-woo stuff?
I think a good focus point would be that specific experience that you had, and that breakthrough that you had with it, and I guess we just kind of see where it goes from there.
Okay.
Maybe we'll try and keep it reined in a little bit, so we don't end going on for like 3 hours, because if you're like me, yeah, I can
3 hours can go by real fast. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and I want to try and keep from. I don't want to make this choppy. I really don't want to edit very much at all if I can help it.
Okay.
Just a good conversation wherever that leads us. But
awesome.
yeah, why don't we start off with your experience here? When was this? Generally speaking, like.
So this was a while back. This was, I don't know. I couldn't say it more than a year ago.
Okay.
It feels about 2, if my memory serves. And,
okay.
Yeah, it was. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite the magic bullet that I was hoping for. It kind of was and it wasn't. On the one hand, it did lead to a small series of astral projections in the moment, but then life took off, and I wasn't quite able to dedicate as much focused time. And sometimes you fall asleep at the end of a work day, and it's just like that's basically not happening that night.
Yep.
But yeah, it really was kind of an interesting confluence of a lot of different concepts, and I've actually started lately experimenting with one of my theses that I had a long time ago, that part of effectively what astral projection is doing, or one of the mechanisms that I believe undergird the practice, and by practice I mean the dropping in, is the idea that you're effectively putting yourself into a hypnotic trance immediately before going to sleep.
That makes sense. I could see that.
Right?
Yeah.
Which lines up, because a lot of what the professional astral projectors talk about is progressive muscle relaxation, feeling the vibrations, maintaining focus. Like, all of these are key factors in generating a hypnotic trance. And so I was wondering if there is some sort of, like an overlay there. There's a common ground there between putting yourself in a hypnotic trance right before your body is ready to go to sleep. So Your trans state effectively keeps your conscious mind kind of locked, and then the sun sets, basically. Yeah, the sun sets and the stars come out. And so you're not so deep in the trans that you blank out, you go unconscious. You're just deep enough into your trans that when your body goes to sleep on its own, you're now plugged into your imagination world, and in a very lucid sort of way.
Right. I love the way you put that specifically in your post. The sunsets and the stars are still out. Like they're always there. It's just now you can see them. And I thought that was a really interesting way to put it. I've had more, I'm sure this is, my dog might bark in the background. Sorry about that. But I'm sure this is a little bit more common as well, but I've had more luck with lucid dreaming than astral projection. And I've been at least lucky enough to really have a clear distinction in my experiences of which one I'm experiencing. And whenever I go for a lucid dream, what I end up doing is I keep my focus as I'm falling asleep. And eventually I'm presented with, not really a thought loop, but I can see where my thoughts are going. And so over time, then I'll get kind of a visual representation of these thoughts, and I can kind of guide where they're going. And eventually they become kind of all-encompassing. And then before you know it, I'm guiding these images, and I'm in my dream and just kind of controlling where all that goes.
Yeah, I have a very similar experience.
Oh, cool. Okay.
On this side, kind of a similar language. I'm tracking what you're following, because there's that hypnagogic state as you're going to sleep where your thoughts kind of take on a little bit more life than they normally do. They feel a bit more real, but you still have the real, hanging out. You're kind of in this 50-50, half in, half out kind of mix. And that's the golden zone, where if you can catch that moment and really drill in on the non-physical thoughts that you're having, and build that non-physical world in a very immediate, visceral, kind of pointed sort of way, you can basically sort of, it's like a pinhole that you just kind of like,
right. That's it sounds like a bad tangent, but have you ever seen Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls?
Right. Oh my God, I already know where you are. Yep. Yep. Let me in. That's basically, or out, which one of the two? Yeah.
I would say my first, what I consider my first AP experience. I didn't get I wasn't completely out, but my head and one of my arms was. And for some reason, I tried a couple different tricks. I tried the rope, I tried the rolling out, a few different other tricks, but one of them, I don't know. I thought, what if I just kind of it just, Jim Carrey's face coming out of that rhino is the thing that somehow worked. I don't know. The strangest things
There's a subconscious link. I have a background in psychology, so
that's really cool. Dang.
Yeah, it's a really powerful paradigm if you study hypnosis for a little while, and I just encourage anybody to try to wrap their head around what's happening with hypnosis. And from what I've been able to gather, I like to put things in crayon versions for myself. So I make sure I understand it. Richard Feynman is famous for saying, or Einstein, if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it.
Yep.
So I always try to go for that. So in hypnosis, basically, this is a loose ballpark. I'm sure somebody in the comment section is going to jump down and be like, that's not actually what it is.
Watching you, Macy. Don't do it. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Most of the time, our left hemisphere is in the driver's seat.
Okay.
Right? We have our left logic, and we have our right hemisphere, which is the creative version. And these can be almost analogously ascribed to as the conscious and unconscious parts of our mind. Although they do work in concert almost seamlessly, they are distinct hemispheres, and they are just distinct things, the conscious and the unconscious. So most of the time, our logic brain is in the driver's seat, and our unconscious, or our right hemisphere, is in the passenger side. And working theory, I think what's happening is basically your right hemisphere, or your unconscious mind, is being put in the driver's seat.
Okay.
Right? And the right hemisphere is not bound by logic, which is why dreams have their own logic.
Right.
Right?
They can be nonsensical at times, for sure. Yeah.
And it makes perfect sense at the time in the dream.
Yep.
Of course, there's
you
a
don't even think
pineapple
twice about it.
in my rifle,
Yeah. Makes perfect sense.
So the hypnosis part is putting your right hemisphere, your unconscious mind, in the driver's seat, effectively, of your body. It's always there, but just like the stars, it's always there. It's just your right hemisphere is the primary driver most of the time. And some evolutionary psychologists are kind of thinking that might be because on your left hemisphere, most of our auditory processors are in our left side of our hemisphere, which has access to our mouth. Your right hemisphere thinks lots of thoughts, but it's never able to speak because the auditory processor is on the wrong side.
Huh.
Right?
That's really cool.
Far out. So if you're curious, you can check out the split brain experiments. There was a series, the treatment for epilepsy. I think it was back in the 80s or something, where they were basically cutting people's corpus callosum, which is the bridge between the hemispheres. And they did that for only a couple of years. Before they realized that was a bad idea.
Oops, sorry, we just cut into your brain. That's
all right. So there's only a select number of people who actually have had that procedure done, but it's a really fascinating treatise to understand that there's really kind of two people in your head.
Cool.
Yeah. So there's two people in your head. There's this creative version of yourself, and there's this logic version of yourself. And because the corpus callosum exists, most of the time they work in unison. And the logic brain is effectively the safeguard or the protector of the unconscious mind, because your unconscious mind can't tell the difference between objective reality and subjective reality.
Right.
From your right hemisphere's perspective, your unconscious perspective, it has no way of discerning between what is like solid, what is considered the collective hallucination, and a dream thought process. Make sense?
I'm following you. That's pretty interesting. It's so you're in again in this post you talk about kind of your mantra, and so you're talking about hypnosis, and so you're in a way of kind of you're starting to cross those barriers a little bit with your brain and trying to kind of, it sounds like you're almost trying to hijack your own vehicle with your conscious mind versus your unconscious mind, and kind of swap the driver real quick right before you go into unconsciousness or sleep. And so you kind of you hijack your own car, if you will.
Yes.
Is that kind of where you're going with this? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. You're hijacking your own car. That's a good way of putting it. I like that. But yeah, so bringing it back around to answer your question, so it was a long story.
Oh, that's okay.
The idea of you like carries significant subconscious weight for you.
Yeah.
Right. It's like that analogy. Like your right hemisphere, your unconscious mind thrives on analogy. It doesn't see the logical connection. It's analogy only. So if you're thinking about, that's why your autosuggestions are always framed in the present tense, right?
Right.
You're trying to reprogram your mind.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's never a future goal. You're like, I'm going to be a millionaire. You never say that. It's I am a millionaire, or I am this, I am that, and that's because your subconscious doesn't recognize past or future tense.
Okay.
And it only recognizes the now effectively, and it believes 100% of what you tell it, of what it gets told.
So yeah, you could essentially, if you understand that basic wiring of it, you can kind of hijack it to do what you want it to do, whether it be lucid dreaming or astral projection.
Right.
For that experience, it sounded like that was kind of your first, like, haha, like your real first breakthrough one.
Yeah.
What was the, I guess, what was the moment where you recognized, oh, this is working, and this is gonna happen? Like, what was that? Was it something you saw? Something like a feeling of it? Was it just?
It was. I guess it was kind of a feeling, and
Okay.
that's how a lot of it um, goes. And I wouldn't. There was a lot of stars aligning for that one. I think certainly there was a certain kind of FU attitude that I had because I'd been trying for so long, and I still like my success rate for AP is like, I don't know, once every 3 months or something like that. It's pretty low, unfortunately. Which
That's
is
actually
really
not too bad.
Oh, okay.
that's still a pretty good rate. From anyone I've ever talked to that's really trying for it. Yeah. Most people it's one every maybe 6 months, once a year, maybe.
Okay, well, I mean, like that's about where I'm at as well. So I don't feel that makes me feel a lot better. I didn't realize it was that low. I read, you read posts where people are like, "Oh yeah, I just astral projected for the 15,000th time."
You see people like that too. But the reason why we see a lot of those posts is because they get upvoted or pushed so much because they're that successful. When people really dig through most like the new posts, or at least a lot of people I talk to, it doesn't seem like it's as easy as some people make it out to be. For some people are just naturally good at it, though, I guess. But
so interesting you bring that up. So when I was in my young 20s, in college, one of my classes required me to keep a dream journal. So
that's interesting. Okay.
And I had no idea, zero idea what was going to happen. No idea. Just keep a dream journal. That was the only part of it. And it wasn't maybe 30 days, and I was writing. 30 days later, I'm writing 5, 6, 7 pages every single morning.
Holy cow!
It was insane, and it was the kind of thing where it was like, I'm not kidding you. It was like a 7-hour movie with complicated plot lines. I mean,
your recall just sharpened that much.
Yes, it was absolutely incredible. And then, after I graduated, well, really after that class, I didn't really keep up practice. And so fast forward many years later, trying to pick that skill back up, it feels like a 10-ton weight, and it's I'm still keeping harder on the rebound. Yeah, the re-entry is real slow.
That's that I had probably, you say all the stars aligned for that first one. For mine, it was honestly the opposite. It was not what I expected. I had gotten overly drunk at a friend's house, and I was gonna crash on his couch. Yeah, and he loves his whiskey, so it was a rough drink, and so I'm crashing on his couch, and I'm just kind of curled up in the little fetal position with, I think, like my hoodie thrown over top. And when I think back to it, probably the reason why it worked was because I was in an uncomfortable position, but I was passing out regardless. Yeah. And so I was quite awake, and I think the conditions were somehow still just right. And it's when I realized that, I can see what's around me. I can see the room. And then I had the thought of, but my eyes are closed.
Wait a second. Yeah.
What's going on here? This is really strange.
Yeah.
So,
that's a perfect example. Sometimes it has to be this, and there's plenty of people who are going to argue with us that you can do it any day of the week. I'm like, I disagree. That key lock of having your brain be in the right waves at the right time, thinking the right thoughts at the right time,
Yes.
and then transferring those, basically dragging your consciousness, kicking and screaming into the dream world. But, I will say that there's probably, in the same amount of time in the past 2 years, I'm not sure if I've had as a rewarding of an experience as having an absolutely direct conversion from the waking world 10 seconds later being fully conscious in the dream world. It's absolutely bonkers.
That's intense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you a couple questions on that post specifically, actually. Sure. With so the bummer for me, and I know that same feeling because I did the exact same thing when I had like a full on where I was exploring and doing all sorts of cool stuff. I had that same thought of, but if I want to remember all this, let's not let it go too long. And then boom. But of course the bummer is that's right after you took that big leap.
Yeah.
As like it feels like the crescendo of something like, oh, this is gonna be something to remember, but I better cut it a little short. Boom. Yep. So could you go a little bit into just after you're out in this dream world, you're feeling everything that's happening, and you come across this, as you described, no more than 12. Could you just kind of retell that little chunk there?
Yeah, so I'm laying in bed, and I think for about a second or two, I only have just barely enough time to realize that I'm standing, and I'm obviously not standing.
Right.
But suddenly I'm standing, and then I'm still thinking the mantra so focusedly that it doesn't even really consciously register that something has happened. Man. And then I'm in this room, and in this room there's a bunch of kids flying around doing all kinds of craziness. And I'm just kind of like stunned for a second. And it's a very school like environment. And there's just this little girl we kind of make eye contact. She kind of runs over. She's like, hey, what's up, old person? Which is, didn't say that. It was just like, that was, brackets old person at the end of it.
Had that feeling to it of like, you're older than I am. What's going on? What are you doing here? Yeah.
What's up, dude? You're not supposed to be here. And I just kind of like, and it was interesting because it was kind of a lot of that telepathic communication that a lot of people talk about. It was just, I had just the question in my mind of, what is this place? Who are you? All these questions.
Yeah.
Like the anime where just like 4,000 question marks show up. And she's just like, yeah, come on. And then I kind of like did kind of just a half-hearted jump thing, and it didn't work. And she's like, not like that, silly human. And then she kind of like hovers up for a second, and that's when it was weird. There was so much in the dream world is so weird. She wasn't demonstrating it as in like how we three-dimensional people demonstrate something for someone else.
Yeah.
She was demonstrating for me the frequency of the energy that I needed to tap into. Yeah.
That's cool.
But, right? It wasn't the act of her floating that she was trying to communicate. It was, hey, look, sense this frequency, this field of energy around me. Put this field of energy around yourself, and you'll also be able to fly. And I was like, well, that's cool. And really literally just by looking at it, I could feel it.
Yeah.
The energy vibration, like something out of X-Men or something. And I was like, oh, okay. And sure enough, just and
cool.
Off I went. I'm like flying around in this little, I don't know what to call it, like a fly around education zone, because
like
all the objects, none of the objects were on the ground. There was
area.
Yeah, it was literally a test flight school zone. Like it was purpose built for that.
That's
everything. Cool. There were platforms that were all like offset, like something out of like Unreal Tournament where there's just this floating platform. And
like a platforming area. You're expecting to see like little jump pads or ammo.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. And so it was a pretty short dream. And after that, after I kind of flew around a little bit, I started to feel a little bit of I think there was a conversation that went on a little bit longer. But it gets a little bit blurry. At some point, I recognized that the dream was kind of falling apart, and I was I need to get back to my body like real fast. Yep. And then, boom, there I was.
And of course, as soon as you have that, like, oh, I should get back. Bam. Yeah. And it's so fast.
And I woke up, and I just grabbed a pencil and paper and wrote down as much as I could. And I think about the next day or the day after I wrote that post.
That's pretty cool. When you describe just knowing what she's trying to show you, as opposed to mimicking just physically what she's doing, you have a sense of what she's telling you, even though she's not telling you it. I always had that thought of whenever I'm lucid dreaming or astral projecting that there's certain things that your body is able to sense. And of course, there are only so many, and so you're kind of limited a little bit. And so I wonder how many of those barriers fall away, or if they're being created by something within ourselves, whatever direction that's going to or coming from. I wonder how many of those barriers do just kind of fall away when we go into these different states. And so if you're talking with somebody, that's kind of the same thing as whenever I've tried to make noise in these other states. I don't actually make noise in the way that most people would think about making noise. It's a feeling that I put out there.
The vibration.
Exactly. And the effect seems to be about the same as what you would normally expect, is it gets attention. And it's so weird, but to really put thought to it is just a fascinating little rabbit hole to go down. But
yeah, totally. I really like the whole subject matter, and I think probably for the rest of my life, I'll be trying to attempt this. I'd like to go to hypnosis school at some point.
Oh, that'd be fun. Yeah.
And really get in. What I want to do is what a lot of people who are trained in hypnosis or do hypnosis or in that universe, plugged into that universe, they talk about that the more you put yourself into the trance state, the easier it is to access.
So just kind of like opening that door.
Yeah, quite literally, you're opening the door. For most people, it's closed most of the time, and then every time you go into a hypnotic trance, and particularly at those where you're barely still conscious, fairly, I guess that would be medium level. I'm not sure. But the more you go there, the more you go to that place, it's like walking a path through the forest. Eventually, your subconscious mind just knows where to go, and that's something that I've really thought would be super helpful for a lot of people, is training that hypnotic trance button to be able to kind of trigger that, just drop yourself into hypnotic trance. Maybe right as you're going into bed, you kind of get set, because a lot of what people are talking about when they talk about trying to astral project or lucid dream or do these things, they talk about staying conscious through putting your body to sleep, or your what do they call that? Sleep paralysis, right? Yeah. Trying to keep your mind awake long enough to go into sleep paralysis. Well, while I 100% agree that that's probably the way to go, I think I have a theory that there might be a better way to go of dropping into sleep, dropping yourself into a trance state, and then you don't even really have to worry about anything else. You're dropped into a trance, and now you're just waiting for your body to fall asleep. And once your body since you're already in trance, you already feel far away from your body.
Exactly. You wouldn't have to worry about you're stuck in sleep paralysis and you got to like hit a certain vibrational state in order and then little tricks, and you might be able to circumvent that.
And I've already started to experiment with that with a little bit, and that's most primarily through progressive muscle relaxation. I have found that is, that's. I mean, there's probably 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different master keys to the kingdom. Yeah. But one of them that I have found that has been, I think, has gotten me closer, has gotten me several steps closer, is going to sleep, lying on my back. I'm a side sleeper, so they tell you to just do the opposite of what you normally are.
I feel that.
Yeah, because your brain's like, this is weird. And then doing a progressive muscle relaxation, more or less with the intent of trying to drop into a fairly deep hypnotic trance.
Okay.
And what that has allowed me to do is it puts my body physical sensations, it turns that volume down to like 1.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, now I just got to hang out for a little while, and
just
I'm not worried about. Yeah, I'm not worried about spider webs on my face. I'm not itching because there's that distance between my physical sensation and where my consciousness is. And I've had a couple of close calls already with it. It didn't translate into a full lucid dream, but frankly, I was just personally impressed with how far I got in the short amount of time that it took me to drop into trance. So
just finding that quicker path, and so, if you can kind of rework that path, you're almost like working a muscle or stretching one out, probably more in this case. So you're just letting it so it can relax, so you can do what you want with it. And if you just hit it faster and faster, and you can actually, it'll liken your results to being able to get there when you want to, and a lot faster, from the sounds of it, at least.
That's what it seems. That's what it seems to me. Preliminary experiments indicate.
Right. It's with the progressive muscle relaxation, or so I've trained a lot of this. This is connected somehow. I train a lot of martial arts, and one of the fantastic. That's awesome.
A little bit.
A little bit.
A year.
Oh, hey, good. That's great. What style?
It was I kind of did like 3 different martial arts. It was Muay Thai, stand-up Western boxing, and then Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, kind of all at the same time.
Yes. All right.
Yeah.
That's pretty legit.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty good.
I've been doing a lot of like hard contact, like Uechi-do karate, things like this, and weapons. And I started when I was like 6, but that stuff. Recently, pretty darn recently, I found this group of guys that do Tai Chi Chuan, like legit, authentic Tai Chi. And I went in thinking like, oh,
that'll blow your mind.
Let's see if these guys are fake, because from what I've seen on them on videos, like it doesn't make any sense if you're just watching it. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to save my pennies. I'm going to go in person, get hands-on with them. And if it's fake, now I know. If it's real, well, now what? And
kudos to you for running the experiment.
That's exactly what it was. It was an experiment. And I was just trying to go with an open mind, and they tossed me around like a paper bag in a hurricane. And there was nothing I could do to them. It was embarrassing at first,
Isn't that insane?
I kept myself humble enough to just laugh about it and go back for more. But a huge part of what they do is called song. And so in Chinese martial arts, song is relax and release. And they, of course, they also highly encourage that you meditate with it. And they have these inner door practices that also involve you're setting in a position, you release and you relax everything. And then you kind of separate from not in the same way, but you kind of separate your senses from your physical body in a way that you realize it's not you that's feeling this discomfort, it's your body. It's not you that's having these thoughts, it's your mind. And you are neither of those. And you kind of sit back in almost a third person perspective. And I found that to be very, very fascinating when I'm falling asleep, to just let everything just kind of sink and melt. And I'll feel things happening, I'll feel like what feels like a fly on my face, but it's just my body trying to get me to move. And then I just, no, it's just That's just my body doing its thing, and it's been a really interesting ride with that. So
Was that
kind of curious to see where that goes.
that sounds so? What's I believe the guy is it Adam Mesner?
That's who flung me around.
Oh my God, you got
Yeah.
to meet that guy. Oh no, I'm so jealous.
It's yeah, it's it was his workshop. Somewhere I actually did a post on the Tai Chi board on Reddit, which, boy, that was controversial, I tell you that. They don't really like that guy. They think he's full of crap. So
I don't know. Like, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
no, go ahead.
Anybody can say anything. That
Mhm.
that dude is the most legit Tai Chi practitioner I've ever seen on YouTube, in my personal opinion. And that's a fair that's my own scope
Right.
on YouTube. I'm sure there's plenty of others, but through the guys that I've looked at, one of the guys whose last name was Clear. It was Clear Tai Chi.
Familiar. It rings a bell.
He's a white guy, Western dude,
Mhm.
but deep into the Tai Chi. And I probably learned that was sparked my curiosity. When he was talking, he was talking biomechanics, and me as a martial arts practitioner, I understand biomechanics.
Yep.
And he started with the biomechanical framework. He's like, look, this is where power comes from. Like, okay, cool, got it. Power, I understand. And he's like, now do the opposite.
Yep. It's a paradox.
It is a paradox.
Because I've encountered people they're pretty good with, like you said, like the body mechanics. And then I saw what Adam Meisner was doing in his videos, and there are some things I'm like, I guess I could see how that could work. And there are other times where I'm thinking, I can't make sense of that.
Here's where you have to be careful. So, we're going to lose maybe half of your audience from this point on.
So 2 people, yeah.
Okay. Sweet. One guy is like, no, I can't do it.
Yep.
From the simple mundane, and by mundane, I simply mean the materialistic universe scientific perspective, right? That which is measurable.
Yeah.
From the mundane perspective, Tai Chi is based exclusively on biomechanics, right? Just angles, positions, things of that nature.
Yeah.
If you're a person who doesn't ascribe to the metaphysical layer of the universe, the extra dimensions, the higher dimensions, whatever you want to call it, then this is where the buck stops, and the following conversation is not going to be for you.
That's a pretty good way to put it. Yeah, there are a lot of people that are stuck in that.
I spent a decade as an atheist, so I'm very sympathetic to the mundane worldview. I definitely don't know. I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum these days, but I am at least understanding of the skeptic mindset, and I try to at least give them the space, just due respect, sort of type thing. So if you're willing to go to that extra level, that metaphysical layer, and say that the astral projection stuff that we do is not exclusively relegated to mind stuff, not exclusively relegated to in our brain. And for me personally, I've read enough where people have gone out and done things astrally and then woken up and then validated it. And I've read enough stories where I'm like,
even if one of those is true, that's the way I look at it. If I read 40 of them and 39 are completely making it up and rubbing their hands afterwards, if one of those people is even close to, then
something else is going on.
It's just kind of,
When you couple, so I just couple the astral projection stuff with the CIA, remote viewing stuff.
Which is fun to read,
It's just great. So there's the CIA remote viewing stuff. That has a powerful indicator that there's, we can talk to our blue in the face on what the mechanism is, but clearly there's something going on there. The CIA is not known for being willy-nilly about its money. Well, I mean,
it can be, but it's They can be, but there's also when they pour that much time and effort into it, and the way they reported specifically a lot of those experiments, where yeah, when they're just willy nilly with something, usually they just kind of drop it, and you're like, well, that was crap. Yeah, in this one, there's a few times where they said, well, it did show some promise.
I mean, this is working for all intents and purposes, and so they kept funding it, and they kept getting better at it, and I believe I have no reason. Let me put it another way. I have no reason for doubting some of the people who are retired CIA remote viewers.
Right.
They're documented working for the CIA. They're documented working for the people that they said they worked for. They said that this was their job while they were working in that position, and I have no reason to doubt them. It seems wildly outside of the standard paradigm, but just because it's wildly outside of the standard paradigm doesn't mean that we should automatically dismiss it.
Exactly. And it's you close yourself off to a lot of not just possibilities, but to just various thoughts and perspectives by doing that. And that's exactly why I decided, Adam Meisner has this week-long training camp that's expensive. I don't know if it's going to be worth it, but I'm going to decide right now that it's worth it for me to see it in person. And boy, am I glad I did, because that was insane.
You did this thing that I loved. I heard a turn of phrase the other day. It said, make yourself the proof.
Hey, that's pretty good.
I really like that.
I like that. Yeah, I like
that.
So
if you're So the people who are on the skeptical mindset, they're like, oh, there's no evidence anywhere of anything weird going on. Like, okay, well, make yourself the proof. No amount of information that I've ever presented to anybody has really convinced anyone of anything. I mean, really, because it doesn't matter what I throw at them. They're like, no, that study was fake. No, that guy's a hack. And it's that confirmation bias that, even I personally, and I know it so well because I was stuck in that mindset so deeply for so long. And, looking back on that decade for me was like, no, there wasn't a single person on planet Earth who could have convinced me otherwise.
Yep.
So I like what you're doing is that, well, hey, let's go spend the night in a haunted house, see what happens. Let's go, let's go test this theory. I think there might be something to this guy. Let's test it, see it out. Bringing it full circle. So that metaphysical layer, there's this concept of energy work. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I was wondering if you were bring this up. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. Getting such a good cognitive buzz off of this. So the energy work is just putting your mind somewhere in your body. If I put my mind here in my bicep, after some period of time, if I maintain that focus and consciousness, I'll start to feel stuff.
Yeah.
Might be warm, might be tingly, might be who knows what.
But you now notice you're aware of that spot. Yeah.
You notice that you're aware of that spot. And by doing the energy work practices continuously for an extended period of time, you start to feel more and more energy. It becomes more powerful. It becomes more immediate. It becomes more visceral. You can feel it flow, all these different things. And a Tai Chi is effectively a very highly refined system of energy work.
Yes, I can 100% agree with that. I've been doing specifically his course for, I don't know, since that camp. The day I got back from that camp, I was like, I'm not going to stop this. I'm going to keep going. And specifically, I think his name is Robert Bruce. He put out a book on astral realms, and so he talks about energy work, and the Tai Chi Chuan Chinese equivalent of, I'm going to find that spot in my bicep is called ting. And so when you ting a part of your body, you put your focus, you put your consciousness there, and you feel it. And that way you can then song it, you relax and release it. And so you're not imagining, like lights going through parts. You're physically putting your focus there, making the change happen. And so your results are then actually real. And so you get really good at feeling different parts of your body. And I've had people that like my wife is actually going through a lot of the training with me, and she was complaining to me the other night that now she's aware of where food is going in her gut.
Yeah.
And
Don't tell people that.
now she's yelling at me from the side.
That's awesome.
So, and I had to smile because I thought, yeah, I remember that feeling when I first realized, oh, I know where that's going, and now I'm just more aware of what food I should be eating and what agrees with me, what doesn't, and so yeah, it's just a very familiar concept, and I've been just, I guess, hitting all the same points that I would need to hit for a successful astral projection without necessarily that always being my goal. And so I'm wondering if maybe one day I'll just be a maverick at it, but we'll see.
We can only hope, right? Like I would love to get to, another 20 years down the road of doing these practices and getting to the point where, there's a practice that I read somewhere where basically he sits down, you get into deep meditation, as deep as you can go. You put yourself effectively in a hypnotic trance, and you have a mirror in front of you, and you transpose yourself into the mirror.
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
Right?
Huh. That sounds kind of cool. Yeah.
Right? I was like, okay. So that was the idea.
Yeah.
And it makes a weird kind of sense because you're literally looking at yourself in the mirror and you try to envision what that mirror image thing would see. Like you can see kind of the back of the mirror and you're looking into the room through the other side of the mirror. And then you just sort of let the mirror go. And poof, there you are.
Boy, that's a really interesting idea on how to get out. I bet that would be a lot easier to successfully get out. I know I read posts all the time, or I'll read different stories where people get like an arm out, but their other arm's stuck, or like they can't quite get their chest out. It's like stuck in place. And that might be a really interesting way to do that because you're not focused on what's coming out. You're more focused on just, it gives you an external focus, I guess is a good way to put it. Something that might be a little more direct. So
admittedly, that's probably going to take that's a person who's very well trained in that deep hypnotic trance stuff.
True.
So you're going to be putting yourself into hypnotic trance probably multiple times a day for probably a pretty long time before a person becomes capable of doing that. But I wanted to bring it back around to what you were talking about, is that Adam Misner, because it's energy work, to me, and this there's a line between, so the concept being is that we have a metaphysical self or a metaphysical energy body or whatever. It appears to us to be our imagination, but that imagination space is an actual space. You could think of it as the fourth dimension or the fifth dimension. It's, what's not up, down, left, or right. Well, I can still move all sorts of different ways in my head.
Yeah.
Right. And so analogously, now it seems like on the surface of it, from a hardcore scientific perspective, that seems trivial. Like, no, you can't go into, that's not a dimension. So it's like in science, we have this concept of what's something called a curl dimension, where a curl dimension is like a pocket dimension from D&D, like the bag of holding, right?
Sweet. Yeah, I get that.
It's a sphere, or the tent from Harry Potter. It's a place that when you go inside of it, you're no longer in this space. So it's effectively a pocket dimension. Well, you effectively have a pocket dimension inside your own head.
That's an interesting point, actually. Yeah.
Right?
That's because it doesn't, as you said, as like science sees it, it doesn't necessarily exist, over there. It's in here, and yet to us, we don't have that necessary limit to where that ends.
Right.
And so it kind of breaks down that barrier a good bit.
It blurs the line, exactly.
Blurs the line, yeah.
Furthermore, on top of that, if you were to think of another dimension that was aside from us, right? So if you take our whole three-dimensional universe, collapse it down to a single dimension, and you could place a whole other universe immediately next to us, and we would never know it was there, right?
Yeah.
So a fourth dimensional object, say like an apple, can exist, one step to the left, and it's in a completely different universe.
And we have no idea.
And we have no idea.
Yeah.
It's literally right next to us, right? So
Yep.
I kind of have this vision in my head of, it's like looking at you, like I can almost like look into your forehead and I see this whole imaginary universe behind you
Yeah.
that's in the higher dimension, kind of this thought dimension up there. And
That's. I wonder. I don't want to cut you off or like stop your
okay.
your stream here, but there are certain things that you're able to see when you're entering these different states. I know, and this one's probably a lot more common with like sleep paralysis. Oftentimes, people see like a sleep paralysis demon. A lot of people have like a common sleep paralysis demon. I see like people, and it's unsettling, especially at first when you see like other people in your house and they're just kind of like they're grotesque looking. It's just it's not but I wonder if there is a level to be reached where you can kind of train your consciousness to kind of skirt that barrier enough to where you can kind of bring some of that vision in. Like, is that something that eventually somebody could obtain, where they they look around and they see those other things, and maybe maybe there are people that can already unintentionally.
That's what we call clairvoyance.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
It's literally what we call clairvoyance. And the people who are clairvoyant and they're mentally unstable for it, I think we call those psychotics.
Yeah.
Like there's, I remember, I don't know if I want to go this direction. I remember there was this guy, he was a psychologist who did these experiments where he admitted himself to insane asylums. Mm-hmm. And he said unilaterally, across the board, every single person that he met, nobody, so let me back up. He's a PhD doctor. He knows what it's like to be crazy. He knows what to say to sound crazy. He knows all of these. Yeah, so he doesn't, and he doesn't even really have to trick his way in. I mean, he goes to the secretary and says, "Hey, I'm a doctor. I would like to be admitted," or whatever. So maybe she knows. Maybe she's part of the experiment. Maybe it's double blind. I don't know. But basically, the idea was that he wanted to really get an inside view of, what it's really like to be a patient, how they're treated, all these different things. And I forget what the study was exactly, but that study kind of changed him, I think, more than the field, because when he admitted himself, all the normals, everybody who worked there, who was not insane, it was like 100%. They all said, "Yep, he's nuts, clearly insane," and no question about it. That dude's psychotic. I work with psychotic people all day, every day. That guy's nuts. Here's the weird part: 100% of the people who are patients, effectively, instantly, in the first day or two, said, "You're not crazy."
They could just tell.
Dead in the eyes, like, you are not nuts.
Wow.
Isn't that bizarre?
That is bizarre.
I don't really know what I don't really have a summary takeaway from this story.
Right.
I remember reading that when I was in psychology class and just kind of being blown away. I'm like, whoa, what is going on there? Like, how is it that the crazy people, I guess it's like just recognizing your own kind or something. I think it, from my view now, many decades later, it seems to me that there's something that's energetically recognized. And I think that, I've been around some crazy people, and there is something of a particularly upsetting energetic, what I would call today an energetic nature about them. Like, you feel it. You feel something's not right about this person. And
sort of the almost like when people describe the hairs on the back of their neck standing up, and they, even if they can't quite make out what's happening, they don't see the glowing eyes or anything. They get that feeling.
And to me, in my perspective these days, that's sort of an energetic exchange of people naturally sensing that there's something wrong with that person's energy field, and maybe it's too open, maybe it's too closed off, who knows what. But yeah, I think that this energy work practice is leading in the direction of, and there's so many parallel lines, like Tai Chi Chuan, there's energy work, there's the remote viewing stuff, there's astral projection, there's all these different subjects that from the start of it, when somebody first starts investigating all these different things, they look like they're all different, going different directions, but to me, they're actually all pointing the same direction.
Yeah.
They're all pointing to the direction of there's some kind of metaphysical layer, there's some sort of higher dimension going on that somehow seems to be related with thought.
Yeah, I agree. They all seem to have this kind of almost like an overlaying mesh, and it's harder to see through that mesh unless you really take these attack vectors and you focus and you pinpoint them to kind of drive through to figure out what the heck is going on with that. And it's in that same kind of way when you get an uneasy feeling if you're talking with somebody and something's a little off, you get a little more guarded. In that same way, if you're in the room and somebody is so chill, so relaxed that they, everybody kind of opens up then without them ever saying anything.
Yeah. In
that same way, I can tell you, like you said, like, oh, I wish that you were jealous that I got to work with Adam Meisner.
Yeah.
I did actually make some contact with him, and that was profound in its own way. But I think the craziest part was just being in the room when he was getting the crowd. It was like probably 120 people in that room.
Yeah.
When he was just like directing people what to do. And we had like Q&A sessions, but boy, it was just there was a certain air about like him and like everybody that was helping out with him. He has a lot of his upper instructors there, and boy, it was just
you feel it coming off of him.
And it took. I had all these complicated questions of like, okay, how in the world did that just work? And they would say like 3 words, and be like, oh, that makes sense. Like, but I couldn't get. Like if somebody else said there was the exact same things in the exact same way, I don't think it would have come across the same way. I would have been so much more skeptical, even if I had just seen it happen. It's just it's just something different.
And that's a little bit of that energetic transmission. It's analogous to what happened to me in my dream with the little girl, and that there's that extra communication that's happening that's non-verbally. It's all just effectively vibrational. It happens to us in real life. Between people, we feel that. It's what Jung might call the collective unconscious, right? We are plugged into each other to a degree, and when you have somebody who's done such a tremendous amount of energy work, like Misner and his higher level guys, they're able to transmit stuff kind of on another level that you may or may not be consciously aware of. So they say those 1, 2, 3 things, and then you kind of like, oh, and it just like locks in.
Yeah, it just that makes sense. Yeah,
they're kind of and it's just like you said, it's like the 3 words that they chose make sense to you right then in that moment because you're kind of getting that extra context of their energy field.
That's a great way to put it too.
If you were to see something like that on video and then somebody were to say that, you're not necessarily tuned into that frequency, so you'd be like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, that's when it just looks like woo-woo, where it's just,
it totally does.
Obviously, that guy is just helping him out because there's no way that, but then you see it in person, you're like, no, I know that guy, he just flung, and I can't move him. What's going on? It's just... So that's
bringing us, again, I love going in circles, so that brings us back around to the whole answering that question of what's happening there with Tai Chi. And I believe that what's happening with Tai Chi is when I'm moving my hand, what's happening, the higher dimensional perspective might say that I'm effectively moving my energy body before I'm moving my physical body. Now, from a mundane perspective, it's just neurological signals and whatnot, but I think we've left those guys in the dust. So what happens, so from a panpsychist perspective,
Okay.
The panpsychism, so the world
Yep.
is all thought and this is a dream.
Yep. It's sort of it's similar to the idea that the universe is just experiencing itself through us.
Yes. Yeah, that kind of thing. So from that perspective, everything that's happening in the woo universe is almost like an inescapable conclusion. If
Right.
you're from the mundane perspective, zero things of this are possible, which is, obviously this is where the struggle comes from. But if you're in the panpsychic, if we're in the matrix, then thought transference is inevitable because
it's simple. Yeah, it's just more ones and zeros. It's going
it's just
to happen.
more ones. Like I'm not even here. I'm a simulation on some sort of computer chip, on a higher dimensional computer chip. So energetically, what happens to a person is that you start to be able to feel, and I started to experience this a little bit in my last year, or in the last couple of months when I was doing martial arts, was this ability to sort of feel what somebody else was going to do before they were going to do it. And you can explain that from a mundane perspective, but I tend to go for the energetic stuff these days. And once you start being able to tune into that, if you take that to like the nth degree, you start to be able to influence what the other person's body is going to be doing.
You trap them. Yeah.
You smile because it feels like you've experienced that.
Very, very, very much so. A lot of my experience in martial arts these days is teaching, and so I'll demonstrate something, and one of my favorite things to do is to freak out a student doing exactly that, and it just because they'll get to a certain level and they know their stuff, they got their stance work in place, their hips are like things are lined up, they're good, and so then I kind of put a little touch of that, and when they realize what just happened, they kind of give you that look of either I feel cheated, what just happened, or the more common of I don't understand what that was, but I'm super excited about it now. And it's interesting that you mentioned, say, like the moving your hand example, where you mentioned an energy body going first and the physical body kind of following. Like I said, with this Adam Meisner retreat that I went on, there's no other way to put it. It was a workout retreat, and there was I think it was 1 hour every day was set aside for just Q&A. He would sit in a chair, the whole crowd would just find a spot on the floor, would sit down and just one at a time just raise their hands, and there's some questions that he wouldn't answer that were it was more like personal stuff about him specifically. If you wanted to know about the art, boom. So somebody asked, because of course Tai Chi Chuan Ultimate, so of course somebody asked, what is Chi? And he gave us that look of like, how big of a can of worms do I just kind of thing.
How do I crack this thing open?
And he said, especially at first, you can look at it as the matrix between mind and body, and that really stuck with me. And so that kind of idea of something moving before your hand does, your intent kind of pulling this thing, and then the physical body following it. And of course, then through things like energy work, or in my case, like standing practice, where you're working the body to relax and to open up, you're further integrating this matrix into controlling parts of the body. And so now let's say you're grappling with somebody, you're doing jujitsu, and you feel like they're about to get that roll on you. And that's exactly it, is you feel like they're about to. You can't necessarily stop and say it's because this foot is over here and they're positioning this hip in such a way that they're going to do this. You just you realize that's where they're going. And I get this feeling that the more you tune into what your body does, you get a real grasp of what they're trying to do as well. And so you feed into that a little bit. And so your reaction time is also a lot quicker if you're nice and you're relaxed, and you move that intent and your body follows suit.
It's very Jedi mind trick stuff.
But boy, is it fun.
I'm really excited. That's been one of the subjects that I've always wanted to explore, but just never quite had the opportunity. And there's so many different avenues.
It's overwhelming, really.
But that's what the extension of energy work can go. That's as far as it can go. And that song idea of relaxation is so I've seen Adam do. It was only on one video I saw him do it, and I think it was almost by mistake. He got carried away because then he suddenly retracted a little bit. He had one of his assistants, and he was doing this. He was throwing him around and doing whatever. Yeah. And then he's like, "Yeah, it's not exclusively biomechanics. Watch this." And he takes his two fingers and he just puts them in the palm of the other guy, and he just drops the dude. And that's when my light bulb went off. I was like, "That's energy work.
Yeah,
that's not biomechanics anymore. We've gone well beyond that. That's energy work. I know exactly what I recognize that, and I see what that's doing. And in particular, there's something about it that keyed me in, like, ooh, okay, so he's going mystical. And I parlayed that with Robert Bruce, energy work, and a lot of other research that I had done in a completely different sphere. And suddenly all that came rushing in and plugged itself into Tai Chi, and I was like, oh, dang, okay, I feel what's going on there. So that's very cool. And seeing, and I guess last but not least, seeing the piece of that intention before you deliver a strike, I think very much amplifies it. And I think that has a lot to do with not just the material world, but I think it has something to do on the energetic world, because
definitely
here's an interesting idea. So if we have a branching universe, and so here's the assumptions. I'm assuming that we have a branching multiverse, where all possibilities. So if I have a choice between a Snickers bar and a Twix, I end up choosing one.
Right.
But that just splits the universe, and now there's another version of me who chose the other.
And another one that chose neither.
And another one chose neither. Another one it's just, multiple infinite.
Just spreads,
infinities. And it's kind of a gross theory from a physics perspective, because it's very messy. But I do like it, and it's one that I ascribe to. In particular because of the idea of, like, if you imagine an electron traveling from point A to point B, the farther away you get from its origination point, you get this probability distribution field of probabilities, right? Because its position is
true.
not actually
it's
located.
Just kind of jumping around.
Right. So you know its location here definitively, but the second it starts moving, that probability distribution field starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as you move through time. So the farther down the road you get, the more uncertain you are of its position.
Right.
Because it's exploring more possibilities, right? So we think of that analogously for our human beings, but because we're at a larger physical scale, our time scales are extended. So a nanosecond is to an electron what maybe an hour is to a human, or maybe a year, say, right? And it makes perfect sense. Like from my perspective, like, in the next, what's the probability I'm going to still be here in the next minute? Pretty darn high. I know where I physically am.
Right.
But if I ask myself the question, where am I going to be in a year? That becomes increasingly more uncertain the farther out into the future we go, right?
Yep. Okay.
So assuming the branching theory, your consciousness can have two effects. It can have effect on the physical mundane world of just, yes, the thoughts you think end up becoming real from the from the psychological principle of when you buy a white Nissan Stanza, you start seeing white Nissan Stanzas everywhere, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a root.
You start seeing ads everywhere of the exact same thing. Yep.
And you never saw it before. So there's that root psychological principle that can explain away this phenomenon, certainly, but I think it goes beyond that. So the idea is that when you have a thought of, I'm going to do X, I'm going to buy a sword,
right,
or something. You're going to do something, you should. Sword makes you happy. you have the thought, and that does change your psychology. It primes your brain to recognize 4 opportunities should they arise.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
Certainly. But I also think that there's a compound factor where the focus of your mind also adjusts the probability distribution field of yourself in the future.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. Yeah, I can see that for sure.
So
it kind of you're in a way you're saying it kind of goes 2 different. It's not a one-way street in a way. It's not just you're kind of shooting forth into the dark. It kind of narrows in a little bit of kind of your future probability field of kind of bringing that in just that little bit. Kind of hones your own unconscious focus.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
You're by virtue of, and if any of your reviewers are interested, are you familiar with Dean Radin? Or Dean Radin?
I'm not, but I'll familiarize myself after this, I'm sure.
You should check that out. It's freaking amazing. Long story short, he did an experiment with a double slit experiment.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Right?
I'm familiar with the experiment, at least.
Yeah, so the double slit experiment, first off, is just awesome. But secondly, he said, well, let's put the psychosis thing to rest. Or not psychosis, this parapsychology thing to rest. And so what he did is he took a double slit experiment, and so you have the 2 slits, and then the electron can go through one, neither, or both.
Yeah.
Or does whatever it does. And so he took a picture of these double slits and he gave it to these people and said, hey, this is what the double slit looks like. What I want you to do is sit in that corner of my laboratory. I'm going to turn this experiment on, and I want you to think about this double slit, and I want you to visualize the electrons going through one slit or the other one. That's what I want you to do. And we're going to turn the machine off, turn it on, and we're going to do a whole bunch of other stuff to randomize the data and make sure that these 2 things are what are correlated. And he had a detector on the machine, or not. He didn't have a detector. Sorry, he had so the interference pattern that's on this back end, right? It stripes. Well, when the particles are behaving like particles, you get just the flat 2 bands, right? Like baseballs. You're throwing baseballs through the fence. Well, you just get the flat 2 bands. If they're behaving like waves, that's when you get your distribution pattern.
They spread out.
They spread out. So by having a camera across the whole back end and checking where all these particles are going, you can tell how many particles are behaving like waves and how many particles are behaving like particles. Right? So you can tell how many are doing what behavior. And so if you just set the system in the corner, it's like 99.999999999 are behaving as waves, because why would they behave as a particle? Nothing's observing them, so.
Right.
Sense.
Yeah.
So this relates to remote viewing. If, I'm just going to leave that aside. It relates to remote viewing in a sense. Just have remote viewing in the back of your mind.
Okay.
If remote viewing works at all, then that means that we're obtaining information about a system that's somewhere else.
Right.
Usable, actual, genuine information. Well, quantum systems change based upon the information that's known about them.
Yeah.
That's the higher level understanding. The low level understanding is that they're changing based upon on them being measured. Not the case. They don't change whether or not they're being measured. The quantum eraser, write that one down. Go check that rabbit hole out. Great. Quantum eraser effectively proves that it's about the information of the system.
That's cool.
If you are somehow, so say there's a quantum eraser on the ass end of the universe, right? And you were somehow able to just pop open a portal, magic portal. You pop open a magic portal and you take a look and you say, oh, I see where those particles are. That quantum system on the ass end of the universe is going to change.
Okay.
Because you derived information about that system, and that system is going to change. Cool, right?
Yeah, that is pretty neat.
Back to our double slit.
Mm-hmm.
The particles' behavior is based upon the information that is known about them. Right?
So, okay.
So if you got a guy sitting in the corner, just imagining that he's seeing particles go through one door or the other, well, then his imagination is what's having an effect on the system.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he actually genuinely detected. And this is what's bizarre. Like, this is where things get really cool, is because he found, and this is the most heavy hitting. This is the biggest howitzer I have in terms of data that supports the idea of the extra material world. Is this idea that by the mind thinking about a system, basically effectively a remote viewing the quantum system. By remote viewing the quantum system, he saw, it's a very tiny change because it went from 99.9999% of the particles behave as waves. So the effect size was very, very small. It was a fraction of a percent.
But just measurable.
Yeah. Bingo. So that's the thing, because the double slit experiment is run like millions of times a second, right? So it's this pulse laser that you can just turn up to like into the megahertz range. So you're literally taking millions of samples a second.
It's as big of a sample size as you can physically get, essentially, because they move so fast.
It's candy land for a statistical analyst. It's great. So because the sample size was so gargantuan, the tiny effect that he saw was very statistically significant. And that's what really kind of locked it in for me personally, was that I'm like, this guy's talking my language. Like, I know what this guy's talking about. And I'm looking at this dude. I'm like, hey, I'm on the lookout for any funny business, but I don't see any. So in any case, that's something that's, I forget why I'm telling you the story.
No, it's okay.
That's what was really, really interesting, was that he had three groups. He had people who meditated, who had at least, I think it was 10 years experience in meditation. So effectively advanced meditators.
Yeah.
And they had a statistically significant effect on the system. By remote viewing the system, they caused more particles to behave, more photons to behave as particles.
Okay.
So photons can behave as particles or waves, wave-particle duality. And so by remote viewing the system, they cause more photons to behave as particles. And to a statistically significant degree, to a very high statistical significance in later experiments. It was something like 5 or 6 sigma later on, which is very statistically significant, which is basically certain.
Jeez.
Yeah, go.
That's cool.
I challenge anybody to go look at the raw data, and it's like, if you look at the raw data, it's like, it's just there. Like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, either the whole thing is just 100% complete fraud, which I just don't believe is the case, or there's something clearly to the data set. So that's
and if there's anything to that, it's the same kind of idea as, like we were saying before. We have all these reports of people experiencing a certain thing, and if even just one of those is true, what does that actually mean? And in this case, that's just wild. If you can look at it and you say, like, oh, that's crap because X, Y, Z, but at least in the little bit of preliminary digging I've done on those experiments, which is not in depth or anything, but I've read it a couple times. I'm not seeing all that much wrong with it, and yet it doesn't seem to be talked about as what are the implications of something like this. And I think the implications are massive.
It's not talked about because it fits too far outside the materialistic perspective. So
that's true.
Material reductionism is just the idea that the material world is in fact material, right? We're not in the matrix.
Yeah.
Right.
So
if I just want to
go ahead.
wrap it around. I lost it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did that to you. If it comes back, cut me off.
Yeah, I don't know. You said something.
No, I can't remember.
I can't remember either.
What the implications of this would be.
Oh, the implications are too far outside the paradigm.
There we go.
Which is why it's not talked about. Because and I put the ball in the atheist and the materialist court. I said, look, you guys have said since time began that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. And I'm sitting here telling you, if that's your demand, this is my extraordinary proof, and the ball is now in your court to disprove this.
Yeah.
You know,
or even just to say that this can't imply anything bigger, but obviously this implies something so out there that we can't necessarily grab at explanations. We can explore pathways that give us perceptions into this new thing. And a lot of people, atheists or not, seem to be cut off to that idea of let's dip our toes into what this could possibly mean. And
the good ones are willing to dip their toes in.
There are always people that are willing to, and I applaud those kinds of people. I have plenty of friends that are very, very atheists that will and won't. And the interesting part is when you know somebody that's very firm in their religious beliefs, so they have this idea of not just the afterlife, but these spiritual beings, and then they disconnect that from everything else, as though it has no influence on the physical world whatsoever. And that's the kind of interesting part to me, is that things like meditation, or just that those planes could be affecting us. They kind of disconnect that. It's almost like when they close the good book or when they leave church, they separate the rest of the life from that. And I always thought that was kind of interesting. But anyway, we should probably wrap it up there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But
I mean, we can leave that one for next time, because that's a great place to. That's another hour.
Yeah. Oh, easy.